Hey guys, welcome to Nerdarchy for Nerds by Nerds. I'm Ted, hanging out with my colleagues,
Dave.
Nate.
and today we're back into DMG, page 271, under optional rules, attack options. What do you guys think?
There's a bunch.
There are.
Basically, see, one of the things I love about 5th edition, I was in a conversation, I think, with Ryan or one of you guys. I think it was Ryan. I remember being kind of combative and argumentative. It must have been Ryan.
I'm pretty sure that's Ryan, and not me.
Yeah. Well, we're brothers. That's what we do.
Yeah.
So we were talking about, a lot of the maneuvers from previous editions. I'm like, just use the shove rules. And then his argument was, well, it doesn't work, blah, blah, blah. It shouldn't be that easy, blah, blah, blah. Like, why not?
There's got to be at least 17 skills for those different things. Right?
Yeah. So I don't know what his exact argument was, but we definitely had different viewpoints, and mine was definitely use the shove rules from the PHB. I don't know that page number, but under here, when you go to disarm, it's exactly like that. Is what they give for the optional rules, and really, climb onto the bigger creature is the same way, right, Nate?
Yeah, you'd use your strength, athletics, or dexterity, acrobatics check, and you can test it against the target's dexterity, acrobatics check. And then if you beat them, you're on them, and you get advantage on attacks.
Which is, and I like it because it's really simple. I roll a die, you roll a die, it worked. And, I kind of like that. And really, what I've been doing in 5th edition, if someone wants to do something that's not covered in the rules or in the book, I set the DC based on how much I actually want them to do it. And if I think it'll be cool and add some flavor to the scene, I generally set it low. And then in my mind, I'm like, what's the critical fail of this? And then I have something to be detrimental to them, but kind of cool. In the game I ran a couple of weeks ago, and there was a monster that had his weapon, resting next to him on the wall. And, Andrew Knapp's like, I want to use my whip to grab it. And he critted on it. So I had him fling it across the room and actually, impale it into the wall. Now, if he would have had rolled a 1, he would have done the same thing. But I would have had him impale him instead, So it's just something fun. And, so what he wanted to do, he's like, what do I got to do? I'm like, just make an attack roll. And,
I think it all boils down to that, that yes-no question. When a player says, can I, as a DM, you really should be saying yes. And, if they're asking for something stupid or crazy,
it's a within reason.
Right.
To the best of your ability, is this gonna game? Can you get it to happen?
So with all of these optional combat rules or attack options, all of these things are something that they're going to add a little bit of role playing, and they're definitely going to give more player buy-in. Because they're doing something cool. Oh, I want to, flip over this guy's head so that he doesn't attack me while I'm, going past him. Sure, that goes under tumble. All right, well, this guy's in my way. I just want to shove him aside. Okay, well, there's that. I want to just overrun him. Okay, well, there's rules for that, too.
They also brought back marking from
4th edition.
4th edition, but it's funny because marking is a lot it's a combination of marking from 4th edition, but also attacks of opportunity from 3.5.
Right.
So basically, you actively are focusing on a foe, going, if you try and do anything, I'm going to mess you up, and I'm going to use my attack. I'm going to use attack of opportunities to do it. And when you do that, it doesn't require you to spend your time to do it.
Oh, nice.
So it basically means that you can do it more, I think, is what I garner from that. Or in the case of, say, you mark Orc A, but Orc B draws an attack of opportunity from you. Well, you can use your reaction to stab him, but then say Orc A does something else to draw an attack of opportunity. Then you could even though you already used a reaction, you could still stab him.
It makes sense because you're in direct confrontation with the guy in front of you, and if the guy's running by you, it's kind of like not. It doesn't break combat in a sense with that one person,
right? And in some ways too, it makes sense that you can't do it a lot. Like if 3 guys run by you, the chances of you actually being able to hit all 3 aren't very good anyway. Mm-hmm. But in this case, because you're focused on the one, you can actually hit both.
And you have advantage.
And you have advantage. That's the other thing.
So if you mark something, any opportunity attacks you get on him doesn't cost your reaction. You do it with advantage.
I think the ranger in my group is going to get a lot of use out of that ability.
So yeah, and we have not introduced a lot of this stuff into our game yet. For me personally, when I run, I'm just like, if you want to try stuff, go ahead. And like we were talking a little bit off camera about this, and you're like, oh, this would have been great to have when we're playing, and you kind of like dissuaded the player from doing it, right?
Yeah. Well, I didn't want to get out of hand with everybody trying to do all these crazy things, and I didn't have the mechanism in my mind for what I wanted to say. Oh, well, roll against this or something. So I was like not prepared for somebody to be like, I want to jump on this guy. Like, what is he gonna do?
I want my pplayers to do crazy stuff. Otherwise, the combat boils down to I hit. You do that. Yeah, you know what I mean. Like so, and I've heard people complain that the combat's boring, in general, and they feel like in 5th edition they haven't done anything to add to it. But I would argue
all of these rules are right here.
Well, you don't need the rules. You need people to do interactions. And every time you say no, you've just killed a little part of that player's ability to ever do anything interesting.
You slit its throat.
Yeah, pretty much. You've assassinated it. And obviously, sometimes when you're playing on the fly, you're not thinking like that. But really, a general rule of thumb, if somebody wants to do something, just tell them to roll die 20. And then you decide what you want to happen. Like if you want it to be easy.
Set a DC. From what you're saying, you can set a DC.
Yeah, and now you have that handy dandy DMG screen that has the DCs listed right in front of you to based off of difficulty. Well, I don't like to base it off of difficulty. I like to base it off of coolness. If I want cool things to happen in my game, well, you know what? You have the ability to go, okay, make it easier, or you could go, all right, you did it. Like the kicker with this game and RPs in general is the DMs that have something that they want or need to do, and then they make them roll a die to see if it happened or not. It's the stupidest thing you can do. Because you're like, I need this thing to happen for the storyline to progress. Well, they just rolled a 1. And then what do? All because in your mind they have to roll the dice. No, they really don't if you want it to happen. Mm-hmm. Or you could let them roll the dice and it still happens, but you explain how it happens based on that die roll. Mm-hmm. I mean that's my thoughts. All right, so basically I digressed a little bit here, but going back to the optional rules, action options, climb onto the back of a creature. You've got disarm, you've got mark.
You got overrun, you got shove aside, you got tumble.
And they all work off of essentially the same mechanic. Mm-hmm. Like they confer different bonuses and benefits. But it's the same thing. Athletics, acrobatics, pick which one you're better at. They pick the one they're better at. And, basically it's a roll or something kind of interesting. But and again, too, like, why not turn failure into something fun and interesting? Like, say your player rolls the 1 on their tumble check. Why they go to do the somersault, but they, instead of landing on their feet, they land on their back, right at the creature's, feet. So it's like, so it's still like something cool happened.
Right. Even if it's bad for the player.
Especially if it's bad for the player. They have attack and cover, which, see, this only makes sense to me, right? If you miss by the amount the cover is giving an armor class, you hit the cover.
Right.
Well, as the DM, you could have them do damage to the cover. Mm-hmm. And if it's something breakable, or especially you got that raging half orc, swinging a great axe. Mm-hmm. That's going to do some damage. Maybe next time you went from 3/4 to half cover.
And maybe the cover is flammable. And I know in a lot of the games, I if something's shooting fire, I don't care if it's a cantrip, it can light stuff on fire if you miss.
Well, most they've put that into consideration in this edition. Like a lot of the cantrips, if it's not something worn or held by an opponent, it automatically catches fire.
Yeah. So that's a big thing with me is there's a hazard to using that. The same thing, like, well, if they're in like a shrubbery area and that's their cover, like a hedgerow.
You say hazard, I say make it interesting.
So that you could blast away their cover by lighting it on fire.
Finally, we understand the true value of the Warforged's ability not to breathe. Smoke inhalation? What smoke inhalation? I set everything on fire.
Now that you mentioned it, I'm playing a Warforged who specializes in fire.
So there you go.
He just needs flame retardant gel for his mechanical parts.
He can spend a sorcery point to gain resistance to fire.
Excellent. Good idea.
Yeah, you know, well, I was going to say like a Dragonborn with that, but then you'd have to worry about breathing. God damn it.
Yeah.
You know.
So you have to have a Dragonborn Warforged, which is kind of sort of what he is.
Yeah.
Oh, the
so,
dragon origin for sorcerer.
Yeah.
Cool.
So cleaving through creatures. Now I've had players that want to do stuff like this, and I've seen it happen on online games too, where Juice has done the same thing, and I kind of just borrowed it from him, where players like, how can I attack more than one at the same time? Technically, by the rules, you can't, but I'm like, you know what, roll with disadvantage, and if you still hit, I'll allow it. Why not?
Now with this one, it's a little bit better for when you're reduced, like you knock somebody down, and you can just continue the. To somebody else.
I actually really like what it's got here. You know, if you hit a creature and you reduce them to zero or less, you can take that. You can carry over that damage to a guy next to him. Mm-hmm. You know, assuming that the attack that hit the first guy is going to hit the second.
This is really good to use, not all the time, I think, but it's really good to use in those mob fights.
Yes.
When you're fighting a lot of like weaker creatures, kobolds, goblins, orcs,
Sturges.
Sturges, and there's a lot of them mixed in together. You can implement this rule to make it so the combat isn't a slogfest.
Turn the great axe sideways and hit like 10 Sturges at once.
Yeah. And, well, you know, hey, why turn it sideways? You just keep slicing through them. They're only Sturges. But, you know, it feels more thematic. You know, it creates more of an interesting combat. It makes me think of 4th edition minion rules, which, unfortunately, they've taken them out. Mm-hmm. I mean, you can put them back in. I actually loved that rule where it created a monster that was equally tough to any other monster at that level, except for they only had 1 hit point. So if you hit them and damaged them, you kill them. Mm-hmm. You know, so it's pretty much all you had to hit them. All you do is hit them and they go down.
Yeah.
But you know, it made for they were actually threatening because, unlike, you know, previous editions where weaker monsters had to roll like a 20 to hit you, they still had the good attack roll. They still had the good armor class. Uh-huh. They still had, you know, the special abilities, the weapon attacks, everything. They were a legitimate threat that just went down easy because they're mooks. I mean, they're not supposed to. They're not supposed to be.
You're 5th level guys and you're fighting 30 skeletons, and they're not leveled skeletons. They're just, I'm a skeleton,
right?
But they still have a sword and
right. So you know, they would have like a minion rule for that where, you know, instead of having to slog through, you know, 10 hit points per skeleton or whatever, you just had to hit them and do damage. You know, so I like the concept. It's in Mutants and Masterminds as well, and I also believe there's other systems that use it. But it's a way to add like a thematic and cinematic aspects to the game, and still have your players and challenged.
Right.
I feel like it makes for more of a. You can have a large combat, but it not be really insane.
Well, that's the point. You're supposed to have the ability to just like mow through them. And actually, you know, a minion rule combined with something like this would be way cool.
Yes.
You know, say you have the epically strong barbarian and he does the leap where he leaps over like 4 skeletons into the center of them all and does like a whirlwind attack. And, you know, but all it really is his normal die 12 plus, you know, his strength, and he hits, you know, so the damage just keeps going through, and, you know, maybe he can take out, you know, 8 of them around him or whatever.
That's awesome.
And it's just cinematic. It's way cool. And then, you know, like, so when you're running the game, people get so mixed up in the rules they forget what the purpose of the game is, to have fun and do cool shit.
Right.
Well, you know, if you're like, oh no, you can only hit 1 and you kill 1. What's fun? It's boring for me to talk about it. It's even more boring to actually play it. You know, so why not do cool shit?
So you want your D&D to look a little closer to Heroes than like I roll a die.
He wants Lord of the Rings the movie, not Lord of the Rings the books.
Yes.
Excellent analogy there. Yeah.
Yeah, and why not? I mean, that's why we play. We play to exercise our imagination and have fun and do things we can't do. Mm-hmm. You know, I don't want my game so real and gritty that, you know, like your characters aren't heroic and they have to be like Lord of the Rings the book where they have to run away from everything and not do cool stuff while they're running away. You know, it's just everything can kill you. You know, what's the fun in making a new character every session instead of developing the same one? Like, I know some people they almost want this simulation of real life in the game. But in real life, you get shot, you die. You get stabbed, you die. One of the arguments that cracks me up for what people don't like about this edition, how they do hit points and healing, is that it's unrealistic. I'm like, it's unrealistic. But you think it's more realistic for someone to get in 4 or 5 fights a day, stabbed 4 to 6 times each fight, and
not die
anyway. So what's the difference?
Thing or something.
Yeah. So what's the difference?
Oh, he's run you through. You take 3 damage. I've got 96 hit points. How many times can I be run through?
Well, exactly. And we always want to describe hits like that. Like you got shot by an arrow, right? Every time arrows are shot at you, the DM's like, oh, he hit you with the arrow. You got an arrow sticking out of you. And you're right. You got 96 hit points. Like, do you look like a freaking porcupine by the end of the fight?
I've started doing this with the new players, with my newbie group. When I say I hit them and then I describe the damage, I let them know what I did, and that most of the time it's not a hit. Like, you just got out of the way. It was tough, but you got out of the way barely. Like, you cut off a few hairs. You used a tremendous amount of energy to not get hit with that sword. And that's kind of like your combat effectiveness has been lowered, and that's what the hit points are about.
Yes.
So until you get dropped, nothing's really happened to you.
Just like because it says 1 attack and you roll the die once, that's not really what happened. The sword gets swung a bunch of times. Or there's feints and there's parries in there as well. But it's not just I swing, you swing. That's what. No, there's a lot of stuff going on.
Go look at the way a real sword versus sword combat would be.
Yeah. And every couple seconds, those guys are losing hit points. Would be the equivalent concept.
If it were legitimate, you get hit, you're pretty much, you're losing a limb or you're dying. I mean, that's pretty much what happened. And like I said, in earlier videos, I've talked about my actual experience with sword fighting, and the best possible action that can happen of you getting hit is you might lose a portion of a finger, and still be able to carry on the fight.
Well, in the game, like I look at it too. Sometimes a hit is you turn the blade. You're able to turn the blade or move in a certain way that where you get hit by the flat instead of the actual blade itself.
Right.
Or you're able to use a piece of armor you're wearing to deflect the blow.
Right.
So where you feel it, but they didn't cut you.
Right.
Some of you guys, you've watched our live plays of my game where we have Todd in the game. Todd is actually a kung fu master, and I was joking around him talking about kung fu fighting or just unarmed combat in general, and he's like, well, I love the way he described actual competent martial arts square off with each other. He said essentially it's like a knife fight, and the guy that wins is the one that got stabbed less. You don't if you're two people that are really good at what you do, you don't just walk away from that without uninjured. You're going to get hurt. It's just you got hurt less. You look at any like real live stick fighters or knife fighters, and there's not as many of them out there as you would think, because you can't keep doing that. Eventually, sometimes it's just luck, and if there is one, or they claim to be one, if they don't have any like scars or disfiguring, they're probably full of shit.
Yeah.
Or they're in 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons and can get healed up just fine.
So
without the lingering injury charge.
I was going to do that as well. I was like, oh well, that ties perfectly back into the injuries, and this is something that I've been debating, toying with for my game, and that's lingering injuries, and I think that's got some really cool stuff. I probably wouldn't have it roll randomly. I would probably use a couple of them that are a little bit easier to deal with until you get...
Some of these are pretty freaking brutal, man. You got... I actually roleplay some of these in my characters anyway. Like my dwarf's... my dwarf only has one eye. And I'm looking at a natural one. If he gets hit with that and loses an eye...
He's blind.
Yeah, so, I mean, because it's to lose an eye, is that a 50-50? They got the socket that's missing the eye? Or I sure hope so.
So, like I said, I would go ahead and... pick out a couple that would be easily dealt with, and as the game progresses and you have access to more restorative magic, you can then go ahead and add the extras, that the cleric in the party can deal with. You know, I wouldn't say, oh well, all right, you lost a leg, sorry.
Yeah, that'd be really inconvenient.
Like
here's the thing too. Like, you got to be real careful with stuff like this, because unless this is your goal to make someone have a character they don't want to play anymore.
right.
Like, if you take the archer character that uses a longbow, and he loses a hand, like, that was his whole character.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
You
he needs a new career path now.
No, I mean, we have, there's plenty of stuff in the game, but it all costs. So, and you got to find it.
Well, and that's it. It depends on how prevalent is that in your game.
Yeah.
In a high magic game, yeah, it's a lot easier. But if you're playing a grittier game where more swords and sorcery, more like a Conan style game, you're just boned. You just got to figure out how to do it without a hand or.
But you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different options on the chart. You can have a limp, an injury, a broken rib, a minor scar, or depending upon the
5
character.
through 20 ain't so bad.
Even a horrible scar isn't all that bad. Festering wound's pretty decent. So you've got loads of.
It's bad when festering wound makes the decent list of injuries.
Well, I mean, they're all things that can be dealt with pretty easily.
Medicine check can heal you up
an
with
internal
festering
injury, magical healing, so a single first level spell or 10 days of doing nothing is going to make it go away. So it's like, you know what? That's easy for any level party to deal with.
Yeah. Or find a first level spell. Can I find a cleric? Any type of cleric.
Or a bard.
Or a bard.
Or an artificer.
Or an artificer. Hook me
Or
up
a
with
druid.
some of those. So unless you're out in the mountains,
Paladin.
I would see it as an issue with being out in the mountains or the wilderness. You're in mid-adventure and you get an internal injury.
And you don't have any of those people in your party.
And you're out of luck.
It's not- So that's why I wouldn't roll. I would choose what off of this works for my game based off of the situation and the actual situation that happened. Okay, well, the guy hit you with a sword. Okay, well, what are the things? That's probably a festering wound or a minor scar. All right, there we go. If somebody hit you with a club, okay, well, that's probably going to say we hit you in your leg and you got a limp. There you go. Have fun with that. So
now, like in some the lingering injuries table is kind of mild compared to other games that I've played.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, I played in one of the early versions of Lord of the Rings, and I don't remember anything except for one of the critical hit rolls you could come up with, and that was and it was for a missile weapon or an arrow. Get through the ear, instantly clears all earwax. You're dead.
Instantly clears.
It makes a tunnel.
So to me, that kind of game isn't fun. I mean, I don't want to play a game where my character can die on one roll.
Yep. Oh, I crit, so let's see how bad it is.
How dead you are.
Well, then you probably aren't going to like the massive damage rolls then.
No, I like the massive damage rolls.
No?
You know why? Because the massive damage rules are very specific. And it doesn't happen easily, and if you're facing things that are equivalent to your character's
and it can't
CR,
kill you; it just drops you to 0 at the worst.
Yeah, so these are very accurate, and that's how it was in 3rd edition as well. I don't think it actually killed you; it dropped you to 0, and whatever. Then the dying rules took over. And there is a couple different things for that too, right? The massive damage, and it's it's system shock, so it depends on what the roll is, what you get. So again, it's another cool table. I prefer this way more than I do.
See, I thought it increased in terribleness rather than got better. So I was like, man, if the first roll is you get dropped to 0, it just got to get worse from there. But then I looked at it and I was like, oh wait, it's the reverse.
It's also a con save too. Mm-hmm. So it's if you take half your hit points in damage. I don't know if there was anything. Yeah, it's just half your maximum in damage. DC 15 con save, and again, the higher the massive damage rule more applies to lower level characters than higher level. As you get higher, it's first of all, it's much harder to take your half your hit points and damage. Becomes
easier to make that save
and easier to make the save.
So, You know,
Sort of.
the massive damage I think is very, very challenging for a first game, because half of the monsters you're fighting are gonna fall into that situation.
Yeah,
It's
like that's every combat. You have to
Okay,
wake 'em up.
all right. Let's go off the charts here. I have a wizard, D6 hit die, no con. That means my max hit points is 6. So if somebody does 3 damage to me, I gotta make a massive damage roll. I'm not proficient in con.
Yeah,
look at that.
But
I'm on the ground.
it's you only get dropped 1 through 3 on a die 10. 30% chance of dropping. And the other ones are kind of like an inconvenience. Although that inconvenience can outright kill you when you're that low in level.
Stunned until the end of next turn.
Oh, look at that.
That's pretty much saying, hit me. Hit me for the next 3.
So and 3 damage is not ridiculous. I mean, you know, you ran Sturges in your game, and they're the only things that I know of that just do 1 damage, right?
Well, then a blood drain.
So
Do house cats do 1 damage?
everything rolls a dice. I mean, even if you're only doing it for a D4 damage, it's not unheard of to get 3 or more damage.
You're a
Yeah,
mage. You're
so.
supposed to get dropped. It's your own
Yeah,
fault
I
for
don't
being
see
a
the
mage.
I don't see the point of using the massive damage chart at low levels, because really massive damage to me is gonna be enough to drop you anyway. Massive damage is not 4 damage. I don't care.
Massive.
I don't care who it is. Massive
Okay,
damage
grab me
is
a
not
dagger.
4
I'm gonna stab Nate right in his chest.
That would be a critical hit, because this book is going to be protecting me. This is at least leather.
All right. Well, with that, let's move on to
Did we break
your
Nate's morale?
Morale. Oh no.
So I actually really dig morale. You know, I've kind of, you know, been using my own system since before I got this, because let's face it, monsters are not going to just stand there and fight to the death every single time. You've gotta have a break point. You know, because it's unrealistic to not. You know, it's a situation where, you know, creatures aren't going to fight. They're not going to fight to the death. They're there for a reason.
Yeah, goblins and kobolds want to steal your shit, not die for it.
Right. You know, if you got an orc war party, you know, that's been brought into some kind of blood frenzy, well, sure. You know, they're not thinking about their actions.
Orcish jihadists. They'll probably fight to the death.
You know, crazy blood cultists. You know, yeah, why not? But you know.
Grumsh lovers on a rampage, definitely.
But, you know, not every single monster is gonna go out there and say, you know, I'm just gonna stand up and fight you until I'm dead. There's just, yeah, I know it's the fantasy aspect of, you know, go in, kill it, take their stuff, but you can't have them kill every single thing.
Well, you can, but the things should try and run away.
Should not be like, kill me. I'm here for your enjoyment.
Unless they're screaming praises to Valhalla as they come at you, then you pretty much know they're fighting to the death.
Modi!
But, you know, other than that, you're right. You know, intelligent creatures, and even unintelligent creatures, like an animal gets wounded enough, it's going to be like, wow, I'm going to go look for something easier to eat, like a bear, than these guys, because they keep poking me with sharp, pointy, hard things. And that guy just set me on fire. This is bullshit. I'm out of here. You know, so, yeah, I've always used morale. I don't have a hard, fast rule for it, but, you know, if you do X amount of damage and it doesn't look like they can win, then chances are they're going to try and run away. If they can't run away, then probably they'll throw down their weapons and try and surrender.
Yeah, it's
And
always
that-
kind of been
Then it's up to the players as to whether they get slaughtered.
I play the creatures. You know, what's their motivation? What would they do? If they want to live and they can beat these guys, they're going to try and do an option that's going to try and get them to live.
Sounds like a solid plan to me.
Which might be, you know, trying to scare them off, or, you know, it depends on what the mentality of the creature is and its intelligence. That's the kind of, I play them as the player. You know?
I that's a good rule.
Yeah, and basically here they give you mechanics to make that happen as all guidelines. Which, I mean, you could kind of use the guidelines and just throw the mechanics out the window. Or, you know, if you're the guy that likes to roll dice, you can let the dice decide.
Roll dice.
No one runs away. They fight to the death.
Every single time.
The dice know. You know, so I think we thoroughly explored the optional rules for combat. There's a bunch of stuff in there. we kind of skipped the initiative stuff because I don't really like it. And again, Nate, you expressed the same thing.
It's extra number keeping.
It's
or record
Very
keeping.
clunky.
I like the sides initiative,
Yeah.
but still, it's kind of it loses that kind of individualistic.
There's only one important thing we have to remember. At least they brought back speed factor.
Yes.
We're not going to use it, but they brought it back.
So if
That ninth level spell, you're going slow on that
So
one.
if you like those extra things, by all means, add them to your game. The rules are right there. We're pretty much unanimous over here. We like the initiative system as it is. We don't want the extra record keeping. We don't want the extra complexities, and the side versus side. It's too
much the other way.
Too much the other way. It's open to too much manipulation, and it even says it in there. It's like, oh well, I know I can attack because the cleric can go before the monsters and they'll heal me, so I can charge when I only have 1 hit point. Nah, that's not me.
Yeah. So with that, you guys, what are the optional rules for combat? While you're leaving your comments below, like, share, and subscribe.
You can check us out on nerdarchy.com.
You can also join the conversation over on Reddit.
So until next time,
Stay nerdy.